All right.
Okay, over to you.
So yeah, good morning. If you're coming from, I think from Europe, from US, good afternoon if you're coming from India. And yeah, good evening if you are Malaysian or Singapore, Thailand, Southeast Asia. Yeah, today my topic, I'm gonna share with you how to deploy .NET Core Angular into Microsoft IaaS. All right. Yeah. In okay. Sorry. So in today's agenda, I'm going to introduce to you the web server that we have, the famous web servers that we have, and the type of web server that you can do with it, and some demo to deploy the um, your application into the web server. So yep. So over the last 3 months, I think we have touched about the Angular from HTML, CSS, TypeScript, JavaScript, and then we come to Angular. So the stack that we can use right here is the single page application. You can develop the Angular as a UI and connect to the other backend. We can use like the Firebase or some Google service to display some simple information. All right. So we call it a single page application. So the possible stack right here, we can build with the Angular here is a single page website to display some information. All right. So the next possible stack that we can develop from the learning over the last 3 months, to build a .NET Core project, you have web API and you have a UI built using Razor and or Blazor. Blazor is a new one. I think they have touched about the Razor. All right, so this is basically about the .NET Core. Okay, and the last one, we will have the Angular. Either you make it as a separate project as a UI, and then we'll have a .NET Core as a web API. So you can put them into one single project, and you can separate them into two projects. So and yeah, these are the possible steps that we can explore. All right. So in order to deploy all these three, first of all, you can deploy it to the web server. The web server call the ng for this one is nginx. Okay, this is a short form, and without the x, right, it is engine, and the last is the x, nginx. So this is how it pronounced. So for nginx, we can use it to host the Angular. If you throw the Angular distributed file to the server, it won't work without the web server. So the web server is the single point of contact where they are responsible to send your file to the user browser. All right. So in order to deploy the Angular, you need the Nginx web server, and you can deploy into the Linux server because Nginx for now, right, it is working in Linux server, and of course you can find some of the Nginx for Windows, but it is not as stable as Linux. All right, so the next web server, a popular one, is the Microsoft IIS. It's been there for many years since I learned programming. Yeah, so you can host your Angular application and .NET Core in this IIS because ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core is my Microsoft product. So you can only use the IIS to host them, and you can run them in the Windows server. And yeah, since from the last time, Windows Server to us is quite expensive. Okay, imagine if you were to build a web server, you need to buy the machine itself, and on top of that, you have to buy the Windows Server license. So add up to the cost, right? To have a Windows Server, it is really, really expensive just to host a ASP.NET application. So most of the people, they choose to use the open source one, just like Node.js, PHP, and same goes to any other framework like Django as well. And Microsoft realized that, and they come up with another web server. It is called Castro. Okay. It is built in the ASP.NET Core. You might not be aware, but yeah, it is built into the ASP.NET Core already. All right, you can use that to host the Angular application at the same time, .NET Core application, only .NET Core, but not the .NET framework. Okay, .NET framework still have to go via the IS server, and it can be run, the Castro can be run in the Windows Server and Linux. So from there, we reduce our cost a lot. So yeah, these are the web server that we can use to host our application. All right, so in today deployment, I'm gonna show you how we can deploy our application to the IIS. Okay, to deploy to IIS. So before we do some deployment, we need to do some setup in order for the outside world to access to our server. So first of all, we have to buy a domain name for ourselves. So if you don't know what is domain name, I can show you here. Okay. So google.com, this one is the domain name. Okay. You can have you can buy the domain name from, I think there are some reseller who sell it, like GoDaddy. You can buy your domain name right here. GoDaddy is quite cheap, right? Especially for .com. Sometimes they give it for free. You see. Okay. Or Namecheap. They say domain name is cheap, but sometimes it is not, because if you were to buy some famous domain name, it'll cost you a lot. Let me show you some example. So it really depends on your luck. Sometimes the domain name is already taken, sometimes it is not. So if it's already taken, I don't think you can buy it over unless you contacted the owner and he's willing to sell you. All right. So this is the domain name and where you can buy the domain name right here. Okay. So yep, the next thing you're gonna have is the DNS, we call it. Is a domain name server. So after you buy the domain name, for example, the domain name that you buy is google.com. Okay. And you have to register your domain into the DNS called the domain name server, so that whenever you type something on your browser, they will translate the domain name into your web server IP address. Okay, so this is the DNS. So before you set up your web server, you have to make sure you have the DNS setup as well. Point your domain name into the DNS and let DNS translate your domain name into the IP address. Right, I see you guys have lots of questions. Yeah. Yeah, so it is totally depends on you. There are lots of domain name provider. It's not only limited to GoDaddy or Namecheap or the other these two provider. And if you can get any and you're comfortable with them, just go ahead. All right. And third, you have to get a public IP for your server or your hosting service. Okay, without a public IP, the browser can't reach to your web server. If they can't reach to your web server, you will only get the page which is the empty one. Maybe I'll show you. Type something that def. Yeah, you'll get something like this. Site cannot be reached because you don't have the public IP. So whenever you purchase a domain name and the domain name cannot translate to the public IP or the public IP is not reachable. So you need to have a public IP for your web server. All right, and the fourth point here, we are talking about the hosting service or a web server. A web server, it can be a Windows server. So in this demo, I'm going to show you the Windows server. Hosting service here means if you are using any cloud provider, like the one I'm using right now, app service. So for every hosting right here, they'll give you an public IP and you can point that into the web app service. So we call this a hosting service, and there are some other service as well. If you like AWS, this can be another option. And yeah, if you were to try out something for free and you don't have much traffic to your website, yeah, I think you can try this Heroku. They give some free usage every month. You can host it for free without paying any cost here. So I can find the price here or not. Yeah, free and hobby. You don't need to pay anything, but they allow you to open for certain time only, not the whole month. So if you were to set up your web server and let it run for a whole month, and you still have to pay, but the fee is quite cheap here. Same go to AWS or Microsoft Azure. Right. So, and also you have to be careful of the firewall. All right. So I believe you can turn off the firewall, but it is not encouraged or recommended because the hacker can easily hack to your website or your server and do something fishy, which I don't think you want it to be. For your firewall and web server, because we are doing web application, so the only port that we need is only port 80 and port 443. All right, unless your web API is hosted in another port, then you need to open up that port, not every port, right? We don't need to open up every port. So these are the checklists that you need to do before you want to set up your web server. All right, so let's talk about the IIS. So yeah, whenever you set up a Windows server, okay, the IIS is not turned on by default. So the link here will show you how to turn on the IIS, or if you don't want to go through so many UI click, you can always use the PowerShell. Here, let me show you how we can turn on the IIS in Windows Server. All right, so before that, I set up a virtual machine in this Microsoft Azure. I have some free credit. I can use it every month for development. So I create a one virtual machine here, and the location I put it into the Southeast Asia, and it is accessible worldwide if you got my IP address. So let me paste the IP address there so that whenever I deploy something, you can try to access. All right. So yep, I logged in before I start this sharing. So yeah, this is the IIS that I'm gonna do something about this later. So let me close this thing. Okay, so in order to turn on the IIS, you have to go to Control Panel, Program and Feature, turn Window Feature on or off. Then you have this Server Manager. All right, you'll see this Add Row and Feature widget. Okay, this is where you can turn on some additional feature in your Windows Server. By default, they turn it off because not everyone want to use the IIS. Some will use the Windows Server for another purposes. All right. So just click Next, and here you have to select the role-based or feature-based installation. And when come to server selection, select the local one, which is this server. And in the server role, you need to find the web server IIS here. Since you only host some application, we don't need the FTP server. So we just only check a few of them. If you want all of them, you just enable them. But I don't need all of them because I'm hosting a .NET Core application, not ASP.NET. So I don't need to turn on all of this. If you need, you just turn them on. Okay. So here you just have to turn on the IIS management or the console script and tooling and some management service. All right. So yeah, when it comes to the feature, so it depends on what kind of feature that you need. So I didn't select any. I only select the HTTP activation and non-HTTP activation. The rest I leave it empty. Okay, and I install it. So, and afterwards I get my IIS. So when you search for this information, Internet Information Service Manager, this will be your IIS, right? Looks like this. So the version that I'm using right now is version 10. Okay, by default, there'll be a default website right here. Okay, I believe you can see something if you type this IP into your browser here. So you'll see this. This is the introduction that you have installed the IIS. You see the connection is not secure, but that is fine because we are not using HTTPS. Right. So right now my IIS in web server is already enabled. So the next thing, if we want to host a ASP.NET Core application, we need to install this hosting bundle. So you can get this hosting bundle via this URL. Here, download current.NET Core hosting bundle installer. Download and install it. I already installed in the server, so it will work if I try to put some application right here. Okay, so make sure you install this one, otherwise it won't run. Okay, so the next thing, I'm gonna show you how we can host this 3 type application. Right, I'm gonna show you how can I host the Angular application. Okay, I created a demo Angular application right here. I think, yeah, I haven't created. Let me create quickly. Okay, I too big. Okay, so yep, I just need to type the ng new, give it a name, Angular UI. Everything yes, because we just want to get the UI running only, so we don't need anything. We just want to use the default UI to host it in my server. Right, let's wait for it to install the packages. So yeah, it will take for a while because Angular packages is quite big, apparently. So the version that I'm using right now is version 11, the latest one, just launched, I think, a week ago. Yeah, it comes with a lots of new update. Yeah, try it. You just have to update it using the script right here, Angular CLI. Yeah, use this one to update your CLI from the older version to the latest version. All right, now we have our application set up. So let's run the ngserve to see the UI. See Angular UI. Okay, now we got our application here. We treat this one as a single page application. Right, let's run ngserve to see what are the UI that we get from this application. All right, I can open up this link. So yeah, this is the UI that we got. I'm gonna deploy into the web server, and you can access it using the URL, not URL, the IP that I sent to you just now. Okay, let me build it. Okay, let me terminate this one. And to build it, ng build -- production. Okay. So let me open the folder. Okay, so we are expecting another folder called distribution, dist here, and we just copy the distribution folder to deploy in our server. So here you go. Yep, we just need all this file. All right. So I just have to zip this one. So this is UI, and I copy this over. Okay. So here we go. So before I start deploying the Angular, so I'm gonna introduce you the thing in this IIS. All right. First of all, there are two things you need to know. First of all, it will be the site. These are the site you need to create for every single application. So the default one is the one to point to, where is it? Not here. Let me type it again. 52. Zero 06.71. Zero 06. Right. So yeah, this is the site. It is actually pointing to this default website. Okay. So if you open this default website, there are only like two files, which is the file that you're seeing is this. Okay. So I don't want this to appear in my IP. So I either can remove this or I turn it off. So here I just remove it because I don't want to use it anymore. Okay, because I know my IP is working. All right, so this is the site that you need to know. The other thing will be the application pool. So what is the application pool? Okay, let me explain to you. IIS can host not only one web application, but it can host a multiple. All right, if let's say one of the web application is hitting some error and it is down. Okay, if you are using the same process as the other web application, it causes all of the web application down at the same time. And therefore, there is the functionality in IIS called the application pool, where you can put your application under a pool. And when one is down, it won't affect the other pool. So it separates the web application by using the pool. So one is down, the other pool is not affected. Okay, so this is the application pool right here. So first of all, let me set up the website first. All right. So let's give it a name, Angular SPA. Okay, so we create an application pool for it. By default, you generate the name for you. So just use the default one. Okay, and the next thing we need to point a path where we host our file into this physical path. So for now, I just put it into a temp folder under C drive. Okay, and I extracted the distribution file from the zip to my temp folder. Or I think I just put them into a folder, maybe called Angular SPA. All right, here we go. So this is the path. You just have to copy over. Okay. What you have to be careful here is that the permission. Okay, because for every hosting, there's some permission issue with this. So if let's say the user that you log on is not powerful enough, you need to set it using another user. All right. Otherwise, you can use the default one, which is the application user. So you can test the setting right here. You see, it's authenticated. It's a tick. The second one you can just ignore because it cannot verify the access to the path. So we can just ignore this one. But make sure the first one is tick. Otherwise, the site won't be running because the IIS does not have the right to go to the folder. All right. So yep, we have it set up. And next thing, the binding. Okay, the binding here is something you have to be careful as well, especially on the type. It is either HTTP or HTTPS. For now, we just have to set up the HTTP because I don't have the certificate with me. Okay, so the IP address, we just put it all unassigned because we don't need to bind an IP right here. And set up the port 80. Okay, if you bought some domain name from GoDaddy, from Namecheap, or from any other domain name provider, you need to put the name right here. So if let's say I'm using Google, I need to put it here so that whenever a user coming from the public to go to a web server and they'll match your host name here with the address they are coming from so that they can go to your site directly. Okay. So right now I need to leave it blank because I don't have a host name as well. So just click OK for this. So they'll create a website right here. Okay. Then let's go to the application pool. So you see there's an application pool created for the website you just created. So let's see the setting. Okay, so it is using the .NET CLR version 4.0. You can flat it into a no managed code because it is just a static website. Okay, the rest you can put it default value. I'm not going to go through one by one because it will take a lot of time. Right, let's click OK and yeah, let's try it. For static website, there's a disadvantage about deploying a new app because you have to clear the cache. Otherwise, you'll keep getting this file. There's a caching mechanism running in the browser, and you have to set disable cache. And here you go. You see, if I type the IP that I give you to you directly from your app, you can try it now. And we are expecting to get this UI. So now you see our app is running right now. So yep, you can click whatever thing here and it is working. Okay, so yeah, and it is fast also. So yeah, this is how we deploy the Angular in our IIS. Okay, and next thing, so I'm gonna deploy the Angular plus the ASP.NET Core in the same project, in the same website. Okay, let's go to my app. Which one? Okay, this one. Yeah, I'm not using Visual Studio because I like to type command actually. Yeah, it depends on you. You can also use Visual Studio if you want to. There's no right or wrong. Using either one will do. Okay, so the website that I have right here is actually a template coming from the .NET Core. The template that I use is the Angular template, and it will generate something like this. .NET run. Let me show you. It is hitting error. Oh my god. The URL is in use. Let me terminate this one. and try again. Yeah, it is running. So let's try it right now. Okay. Yeah. So this is the template, Angular template in .NET Core. Okay. There are three parts. The first part of it is the Angular. The UI part is Angular. You can go to counter here. You can click on it. You'll see the counter is running. So this is done by client-side Angular. And the second part is fetching data from the server. Okay, so the server actually has one controller running. Okay, let me turn off this console. Okay, so we have one controller called weather forecast controller, and there's one HTTP GET here, and you return some data to the front end. Okay, so the Angular is actually sitting in this client apps. Okay, so there's a note I would like you guys to take note is that on the startup file, by default, the controller mapping is come without the API. Okay, but I would like you guys to add the API for this simply because the Angular route will clash with the controller route. So in order to avoid that, it's better for us to add the API here, and same go to our controller. So give you some example. If this one is weather forecast, okay, and when come to our application right here, if we put the weather forecast, if let's say there's a route in Angular called the weather forecast as well, which one does the web server have to send out, Angular or the web API? So in order to prevent that one, that issue happen, so it's better to have the API in the middle to differentiate. One is the backend, the other one is the UI. Okay. So yep, this is working. Let me build this one and deploy into the server. Okay. Right. I'm gonna stop this local server. So the command to publish is called .NET publish. And then let's see the output. The output is -o. Okay, we're gonna put somewhere. Okay. .NET publish that -o, then we put it into a temp folder. Okay. And they'll build not only for the API, the .NET Core, they'll build for the Angular project as well, because it is status in this CS project file. Where is it? Yeah, you see npm run build. This is where it run the build for the Angular. Okay. So if you want to have your .NET Core project and the Angular working together, you can refer to this template. The template can be generated using this .NET new Angular with the project name something. Okay, and then they'll generate this project, and you can refer to this code to see how they set up the Angular running alongside with the .NET Core. Okay, now I have my project published to this folder, C drive, temporary folder. Okay, what I have to do here is to zip it, call it .NET Core plus Angular. Okay, then I move it to the server. Okay. So for this one, I have to stop this Angular application because I only have one IP address. So I just have to stop this Angular. And okay, I'm gonna put the compile code into the temp folder. So let's call it .NET Core. So copy paste over. So in the output file, you'll see the client apps. There's a distribution. This is where the Angular code sitting. Okay, and the rest of them are the .NET Core code. And if you look at the .NET Core code, right, there's a file which is very interesting. It's called the web config. The web config file is actually a setting for setting up the IIS here. Whenever you created a website, if you click on your website, there'll be a bunch of settings sitting in the center here. All right. So this setting are actually stored in this web config. If you change something in the web config, it will reflect in the setting as well. So they both are the same. It's either you modify the setting via the web config, or you go through the UI in IIS. All right. So after I stop this Angular SPA, let's create a website for the .NET Core. So I also create a new application pool for this application because I don't want to match with the other one. So it's a good practice to have different pool for a single website. So just paste your path here. Make sure the permission is given to access to this folder. And same as the previous one, I just have to assign it to port 80 without any hostname binded here. Yeah, this one you just ignore because we have the Angular SPA running in the same port, just that we have disabled it, so it won't cause any issue. So let's come to the application pool. So just now we created another application pool called the .NET Core. So let's see what settings we have here. So for .NET Core, they encourage us to turn off this one, the .NET CRR version, to the no managed code, because the Castro will handle the web server. So we just have to flag this thing into no managed code here. And the rest we can just leave it by default. You don't need to change it unless you have to. Okay. Yeah, and now it is running. Let's try. So turn off this thing. Yeah, this one. Okay. Open my developer tools. Go to network. Make sure the cache is disabled. Refresh it. And here you go. If your cache is still there. There are a few ways to do it. You can always right click on the refresh icon here, empty the cache and do a hard reload. Okay. Otherwise, I think the straightforward way that I always do is make sure this tick is on, make sure the developer console is turned on, and then you just click one more time, you clear the cache. Simple as that. So yeah, we have our application running in this URL, and you go to counter, you can see it is working, and fetch data as well. You see the data is running as well. So let's see the request. Make a refresh. So weather forecast. Yeah, you see this is the API that I'm calling. Okay, the preview. See the data that I got from the backend. And yeah, this is it. So this will be a bit complicated. So do you have any question for this? Before I proceed to another way of set up the application? No? All right, then let's proceed. Okay, the last part. Sometimes I would encourage, sometimes I would say, right, having Angular and ASP.NET Core in the same project, right, it will be a bit hard to maintain because sometimes it'll cause some issue with the route and it'll cause the compilation a bit more thing to configure. Like if you see at the cs.pr, the CS project file, if you don't know how to set it up and you are not aware of the setting right here, you take some time to figure out. So most of the time, I would encourage you to have Angular and .NET Core into a separate project where you have the Angular as a single project and .NET Core Web API as a single project, and you compile it differently and deploy it into different websites. Okay, let's do it now. Yeah, I think we can close this one. It's done. The Angular UI is done. So yep, here we go. So this project is a web API project. It has the same controller as well, called the weather forecast. Okay, it's the same backend, just that the little trick that I did here is I turn on the cores. Where is it? Here, core. So let me give you some information about this core. Okay. For web security purposes, okay, whenever we have a domain like this, and we actually can call to the server to get some data with the same domain only. All right, if let's say this is my domain, for example, google.com, I can only call to the google.com web API to get some data. If I were to go to yahoo.com to get data, the browser will block me. Yeah, this is what we call CORS. The browser simply don't allow you to do so because the web server disable it. And in order to allow the other people to call to your web service or your web API, you have to turn on the CORS in your web API. Yeah, what I did here is to add the CORS here, but you actually can limit some domain to access to a web service, but not all. So something I did right here is for demo purposes. So don't allow any origin to call to your web service, and it is very dangerous. Normally, we just have to limit to some of it, not all. So for the demo purposes, I just allow all for now. And I have to go to the configure function here to allow the call. Okay. So we set up a policy here and we apply here. Okay. Just few lines of code and then yeah, we're done. Okay. And of course, in our UI, I pre-generated the UI copy paste from the project earlier. And what I did here is that I make sure the URL, I just have to make sure the URL that I'm pointed to is the URL that the web API is using. Okay, so right now I just have to make sure to copy this one. So this is not a HTTPS, and I have to put the IP. And the port, I just have to hard code it to 8080. And yep, here we go. Okay, so to publish it, a bit tedious. So first of all, I have to remove the file here so that it won't overwrite the folder. So .NET publish, then the output is C10. So at the same time, I'll build the Angular shell and G dash prop. Okay, now the API is ready. Let's deploy the API first. Okay, this is the API file. All right, just zip it. API. Then I just copied it into the server. Okay. In the temp folder that I created just now, I will create an API folder. Okay. Same thing here. I need to turn this off. Okay. I will create a new website called the API. At the same time, we'll create a new application pool. So I need to point the physical path to the temp folder. Okay. And make sure I have the right access to the folder. And I will leave it. Just now I configured the port is 8080. So I make sure it is 8080 here. Okay, I turn off the firewall in this server already. It's not encouraged to do so. Just that I want to demo to you. So I just temporarily turn it off and make sure the network firewall allow the port 8080. So if you're using Azure, you need to go to the virtual machine, go to the networking, and make sure you have the port 8080 is enabled. Okay. And the next thing would be I click OK. Okay, and then come to the application pool. You have the API application pool here. Go to the advanced setting. Make sure you change the .NET CLR version to no managed code because this is .NET Core, and click OK. All right, so here you go. It is already working. Let me copy this URL. API, then weather forecast. Let's try it out, see whether it is working or not. But apparently it is not. Let me see. It is not working. API weather forecast. Let me check. API weather forecast. Something is wrong. Okay, here you won't get anything. API weather forecast. This is wrong. Interesting. Let's come back to this later. Let us deploy the UI first. Yeah, I think. Is there anything extra has to be done by Angular to send out the CRS enable reply request? No, Angular UI doesn't have to do anything. Only at the web API side have to enable the CORS, the CORS, then it will work. So let's come to the UI. We'll come back to the web API later on. I think probably is the port issue. Okay, we already built this. Let's open up this file explorer. You'll see the file is already compiled. That's zip call UI and copy paste to the web server. Okay, then we have to set up one website, port 80. We name it UI, and it will create a new application pool as well. And then we have to extract the file into the UI. Okay. Yeah, it's done. So yeah, we have to paste the path here to this physical path and make sure the authentication is running. And you are allowed to access to this folder and map this one to port 80 because for UI, we don't need to use another port. We can use we can use the port 80 straight. Okay, your prompt use some error, but that is fine. Just enable it and go to application pool, select UI because we have to flag this thing into no managed code. Okay, and yep, it's done. And I believe we can browse it right now. Yep, it's running. Just that this will get some error. It'll always keep loading because our web API is not running. Let's come back that one later. Make sure I can access from my computer, and you can try as well. I think it's running on your side already. Yeah, See, it's running. So home is working, counter is working, fetch URL is not working. So the error that you'll get is this. See? This is something what I mentioned here. Yep. Because I tried in my local, it is working. This is interesting. Let me explore. Oh, the folder is empty. I haven't pasted the code over. No wonder it's not working. So sorry. Yeah. Ta-da. Okay, now we have the code here. Should be running right now. Let me try. Oops. Yes, it is running. Okay, just now I forgot to paste the code. So what you have to do for this, right? So I separate this to the UI and the API in separate project. So you'll see two websites right here. So the UI will call to the web API via the other address. So you can assign it the address like this. Maybe, okay, maybe you got the domain, for example, calldomain.com. Okay, this one will point to the UI. Okay, for the API, maybe you add a subdomain on top of your domain called the api.domain.com. So this one, you point it to your API. So these two will have two different API, and you work just like what you wish for. Yeah. So yep. So just now there's an error with the Angular. If you type something there, you get this 404. This can be handled using, let me check whether I can handle it or not. Otherwise, I'll come back to you afterwards. I remember last time I used to have this issue. I solve it using the redirection right here. It's not here. I don't have the module installed. Yeah, I come back to you with this afterwards because this is something we have to fix. Okay. Only because otherwise when you copy paste the URL to another guys or your friend to show them, when they paste into the browser, you get this kind of error. This is not nice. But I think it's already handled in the Angular. I'm not sure why it's not working. It should be the app. Then you come to the routing here. Yeah, it's not set up. I think we can solve it here. ***. Then you have redirect to. If you have this set up, then it will redirect to this page if the URL is not matching. Yep. So yeah, so let's come back to my slide. I've done my demo. Any question up to this point? Yeah, no. Okay, let's proceed. The last slide. All right, things to consider. The deployment I did just now is very manual. So you have to make sure your server is running, nobody is using the website, and you have to do it manually, copy the file, compile, because there are too many user action here. So when something involves a lot of user action, um, it is it will prompt to error. That means you will be you create error easily during the deployment. So in order to avoid that, I would encourage you to try the automatic deployment. They call continuous deployment, CI/CD. Yeah, it totally depends on you. If your application is not a big application or very large application, you can do it manually because very less people is using. Otherwise, you should consider using the build pipeline in Azure DevOps if you are using any, or GitHub Action, or Jenkins, or this kind of automation deployment. You can use any of them, and it is fast and you create less error. So the next thing you need to consider is to use the container. Yeah, if you look at the server that I'm using right now, in order to create that server, there are so many steps to do. Like you have to create a server, a web server, and you have to install this, install that, and make sure the permission is given, and make sure the file and IS are properly set up. And there are too many things to do with the server setup. And yeah, this will create lots of steps in order to deploy your application. Yeah, so here I would encourage you to try Docker. So set up the Docker, I think, is the simpler version to use. And also you can explore Kubernetes. This will be more advanced. Yeah, you can use Docker as the container. The Kubernetes will be the orchestrator to deploy the Docker container into your cloud. So the one currently my company is using is called AKS, Kubernetes Service. This one. Yeah, I know there are lots of things to learn to use the Kubernetes, but it was, I would say, worth your time because it really gives you a lot of benefit using the container. Okay, and lastly, because you're using .NET Core, I would like to add one more point here. Try to use Linux. Okay, the container that Linux provided is really fast. It can start up the machine at the same time run your application within a few seconds, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, your application will be up and running. Yeah, furthermore, Linux is free. So you no need to pay any license fee to it compared to a Windows Server. If you look at Windows Server, startup is slow and there are too many utility or tool installed in the server which we are not using. Yeah, and of course, Windows Server will give you the UI so that you can manage your stuff easily. But on our production, we don't need that. So I would encourage you guys to try on the Linux here. And I think Visual Studio provide a functionality where you can use a Docker. You can develop your project directly in the Docker container. yeah, I think this is something you need to consider because more and more enterprise are adopting this approach compared to use a Windows Server last time. And yeah, I think that's all about my presentation. And do you have any question, you can ask me now. Yeah, feel free to ask. Yeah, you can unmute yourself to talk as well.
Any questions for HongTat?
Yeah.
Yes, can you please go to the slide number 10?
Slide number 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Yeah, it's regarding CI/CD pipeline and using the container. So in general real life project, we do check in the code some repository, and from that repository it will directly deploy to the QA or stage or production according to the required permission, all these things.
Yep.
So in this scenario, that's what I have said. Where do we use container, Docker, or Kubernetes?
Where do I use the container or Kubernetes? Okay. Actually, in my Visual Studio, okay, let me open up some of my company project to show you. Yeah, it's not something very secret. It's not a secret, so you can see the code. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So okay. Okay, I only can give you a high level direction. I cannot give you something in detail because it really depends on your use cases. Okay, so because I have the Redis in not Redis, I have the what we call that, an extension resharper install. The resharper is good for your code, but it will slow down the Visual Studio performance a lot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is a file called Docker file. Okay. Docker file is where you will do something with the container and copy your code into the container and build it as an image. Okay. So this is all the code that we have here. If you don't want to use this, Microsoft actually have a simpler version because this is my company version. So yeah, let me try if I can create a simpler version. Okay. C#. I hate resharper. Yeah, I think this one. ASP.NET Core Web Application. Okay. Just give it a name. Okay, from here I'm using the version 5. No, I have to change to 3.1. All right. Okay, so just now I'm using the Angular template. You can use the Angular template or the web API. It depends on you. So I select the Angular tab. No, because for performance issue, I use the API one. So if you look at here, there's something called enable Docker support. Okay, and then select your server, select Linux, okay, and create. Mhm. Where's the Docker file? Yeah, the Docker file is here. Okay, so by default, it give you a Docker file here. So if you look at the Docker file, it'll pull some image. It's a Linux image from Microsoft repository, and set up, expose the port, and set up everything. And you just have to build. You see, you just have to build, and of course you need to have the Docker for desktop running. Okay, and you just have to build it, and then your application will be running in the Docker container. And you just have to continue develop your code. And yeah, your application will be running in the Docker. And
Right.
this is for building the Docker. Okay, and if you look at this one, I haven't finished yet. Yeah, publish. You need to publish it to the container registry. If you have one in Azure, if you don't have, you can select you can create one here. Otherwise, you can use the Docker Hub if you want to where you want to save your image into. Okay, from here you can build your image and have your running application inside the container, and then you push it into the registry. The place we store the images are registry. So yep, when you push it into the registry, I give you the example, hub.docker.com. Okay, you can search. For example, yeah, you can search your image, but the one I believe you want to push it into the private one. The one I'm showing you here is a public one. It's something similar to the private one, just that it is public access or private access. All right. So your image will upload it into the hub or core registry, and you can download it by using a Docker pull command. Okay, and yeah, after you build your application, send it into a container, and then Docker will help you to build it into an image and publish it into a a registry. And afterwards, you come to the Kubernetes service. Yeah, the terms are quite confusing. I don't want to explain here. If I explain further, right, you'll get more confused. But you can, but when you are about to deploy your container here, right, after you create all the cluster, everything here, you actually can get the image from the registry that you upload your image to and let it run here. So this is how it works. Didn't have. Yeah, I think they don't have a Docker container service here. So yeah, you have to go through the Kubernetes service. So you have to set up the infrastructure here and pull your image and run it here. So this is how it works. And yeah, earlier I paste a link. I believe I paste a link here. It's a tutorial provided by a famous tutor about the Docker and Kubernetes tutorial and deployment. And you see there are lots of it. You have to learn everything right here so that you are familiar with Kubernetes and Docker.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much for
I only
all
can
these
give you the
details.
I only can give you a high level because deep down into the Kubernetes there are too many things. I can't even I couldn't know every single details on the settings. It is too much for me to
Yeah.
handle already. Yeah.
In fact, we have a Docker and Kubernetes session tomorrow. If you are also free, you can join for that one. But it's also going to be an intro, an overview, and of course for deep dive, yeah, maybe we can go through the YouTube ourselves. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, sure, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah. Another question?
Anyway, I just want to take the opportunity to say a big thank you to HongTat for organizing all these Angular sessions so far. We still have one last one. Well, we still have one session next week, which is the calling API from Angular, and Anubhav is going to present that one. I'm not sure if he's on the call today. Maybe not. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, HongTat, so much for organizing the Angular study group session so far. I think we all learned a lot.
Hope it helped. Yeah.
Okay. I guess any final questions before we finish for today? Oh, actually, I'll stop the recording now.